And next we have Enchilada Supreme. And after that we have the Incredible Bulk. And after that we have Thanos. And then after that,
Slimin'
the
Sammy
Mighty Thor.
Manacker. Max the Iron Man.
I love
Rasputin?
that. He says, I am Iron Man.
Cinematic Fantastic.
Klaatu, Barada, Nikto.
I'll show you who I am and what I am.
Bitten by a werewolf and lives, becomes a werewolf himself.
Open the pod bay doors, Hal.
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
Hello and welcome to the Cinematic Fantastic Podcast. I'm your host, Jason Weatherford.
And your other host, William Weatherford.
Get ready for opinions, dad jokes,
and bad jokes
as we watch and review sci-fi and fantasy films from the classics of yesteryear to the new favorites of today.
Clifford needed Emily so much, she chose him for her own. And her love made Clifford grow so big that the Howards had to leave their home. Clifford's the best friend anyone could know. He's the greatest dog ever. I really think so. Clifford's so loyal, he's there when you call. I love Clifford, the big red dog.
Big red dog.
Now, why are we talking about Clifford the big red dog? Today we're talking about a big gray gorilla. Mighty Joe Young, 1949.
There is a part where this big gray gorilla has a red tint to him, but we'll talk about that later. Now, one thing I wanted to talk about is not...
First of all, this movie literally is Clifford the big red dog. This movie would basically be the origin of it. It also is sort of a proto-Dumbo, because the plot basically is... There are parts that do mirror Dumbo a little bit, and Dumbo came out in the way that an animal with special powers goes into, is hired into the entertainment industry, gets terrible success, but then something happens to where the character then has to make amends, I guess, outside.
Yes.
I still don't know how exactly I feel about the way Dumbo ended, but it really just ends with a whelp, So
yeah, and of course the music is a lot better than in this. You only get really one song.
Yeah, but in this movie, a baby gorilla is found by a girl named Jill and is raised to become so big that everyone loves her, including not only the entertainment industry, whom hires Mighty Joe Young for entertainment purposes, but also those who want to steal him away for their own gain and go punished. And an orphanage burns down at the end, so...
I don't think anybody wants to steal him away. They're just kind of like, he's a menace. He's a menace.
I think
like Spider-Man, he's a menace.
Is that this film doesn't have any villain other than being stolen away. I guess people were
Max. Okay, well, humanity is kind of a villain, and Max O'Hara, played by Robert Armstrong, is kind of a villain too.
Yeah, they go up to him and go hey, go escape and everything. But
yeah, we'll
there isn't
go
really
into that.
A villain as much as the Disney remake, which I don't know that much
Disney, about. I know I've seen the Disney remake quite a few times in the past. I want to watch it again just after watching this, but there's some stuff I remember about it. One thing I wanted to mention that's kind of recent, topical, near and dear to my heart. I have a lot of good memory of a particular person. I'm not going to be sad. I'm only going to celebrate this person and their life's work. And this man's name is James Earl Jones. He passed away about a week ago as of this recording coming out. And he died at the age of 93. He has been in at least, that I know of, 71 films over his career. He's also been on
illustrious, let's say.
Illustrious. He's been on the stage. I'm going to give a quote from him. Let's see if you can realize. I'll take out a clue as to what movie this is from. A king's time as ruler rises and falls like the sun. One day, the sun will set on my time here and will rise with you as the new king. It's Mufasa from The Lion King.
Oh, I would have got it if you had talked about the everywhere the sun touches. But
I did have that quote, but I wanted to use one that talked about my time. The sun will set on my time here.
I'm curious how many Disney movies like mention the sun in any particular way. Like I don't know, like some
I don't know.
Someone's like the sun. They sing the sun, or like
so, okay,
the sun.
Let's see.
That's so weird.
In no particular order, here are my favorite roles he's done. Thulsa Doom in Conan the Barbarian, he was the villain. Terrence Mann in Field of Dreams, he was like a reclusive journalist, and he who comes back to the joy of what he first was writing.
And more
about.
famously,
his most famous role that he only got paid $7,000 for the first time was Darth Vader, the voice of Darth Vader.
not
physically,
the actual actor, because
David Prowse. Yeah,
yeah,
played
I was about
the
to say,
physical Darth Vader.
either
Yeah.
David or Harry played the body role of him, although the voice was different because he had the muscles, but he didn't have the voice, so they got a different voice.
Well, when they did there's actually footage of him going, "You need to go over here and do this." David Prowse is speaking with that Scottish accent, and you're like, "That's not my Darth Vader." But then when you hear the voice, "No, I am your father."
That famous voice it definitely has credit, but Dave Prowse also, because he was literally just the body underneath the mask, and every time they were anything other than what was underneath the mask, revealing the mask at the end.
Also, I think it was a
different.
it was a different actor who portrayed him.
He never saw the light of day.
In Rogue One, I believe. We're not really here to talk about Rogue One today. We are here to talk about 1949's
Mighty Joe Young.
Mighty Joe Young.
For posterity's sake, which, by the way, I learned what posterity, the definition of posterity, because I was like, what does that actually mean? Thoughts everyone has outside of the shower if they're divergent, inside the shower if they're neurotypical. Anyway.
Right.
That is to say, it's a large-scale film. This film, from the opening title sequence, the way it's dramatically heightened.
Yeah.
They usually don't do much special for that, but then this one has various scenes, and it's just
lots
overall,
of original,
larger scale.
Lots of original music. Did you like the music? I noticed that it was lots of original music.
It's just so fresh.
But it's also a throwback. And, we can talk about that when we get to the production part, but it's after World War II. This is not a dark movie and cynical and talking about, man's inhumanity to man, what we just got out of.
This is actually a very light-hearted film.
It is, and it's a throwback to the early 30s, or that pulpy sensibility. So,
which actually, with the rise of television in the 50s, would likely put more spotlight on those pulpy, I guess silent films as well, they would put on there as well.
This movie does start in the past. It starts in 1937, but where does it start? Africa. Where in Africa? Just the continent. It shows how we thought of Africa then. It's like, there's at least 40 plus individual countries there on the continent. Nope, just Africa. I'll talk about how kind of off there. Jill
Child
Young,
actor.
Yeah,
I don't think we've ever had a child actor, especially as a protag, in these movies.
Yeah, not that I know of. Yeah, she's played by Laura Lee Mitchell. She's 8 years old, which I thought she was a little younger than 8. Maybe that's, and we'll talk about ages and how it is a little strange in a minute. She's living with her father, John Young, played by Regis Toomey, on his ranch. While in her yard, 2 African gentlemen come by with an orphaned baby, a gorilla. Jill wants a pet.
Just so you know, there is some fake African speech in this. They do mumbo jumbo it a little.
It's supposed to be Swahili. She mentions that, she says to her father, they don't even know Swahili. So it's supposed to be Swahili, but I'm not sure.
It's not. It's likely not. Especially with the word repetition. That is really just mumbo jumbo.
It's probably a little bit more, Endo. It's probably more likely. It sounds more real than the language that was in Bela Lugosi meets a Brooklyn Gorilla, which that was all made up. Has to be.
Yeah, that had a more forefront of the movie. Anyway, she sells a lot of her toys and her father's flashlight to them in exchange for a baby gorilla.
Did you notice the jewelry was being dangled and it was really shiny, and they were like they didn't want it, And also the flashlight. I made a note on that. How useful is the flashlight going to be when it runs out of batteries? They're going to have to come back and trade something else for batteries, but they don't know that because
they think it's cool.
No, what they do is they make white people smart and dark people dumb, and that's just look. I mean, it was the late 40s. I don't think we would have gotten a really smart bone in our body until later. We actually realized. Hey,
I mean, even still,
smart.
there is I guess there are really just merely working off the innate. Look at this stuff. Isn't it neat? When you say, my collection's incomplete without this flashlight, give it to me right now.
Right. Do we skip forward 12 years after that?
Yeah,
I think
gets
her
the baby gorilla,
her
and then
dad.
the dad's like, yo, we can't keep this around, but they end up keeping the baby gorilla anyway.
Though. He folds. He kind of goes, oh, okay.
And that gorilla ends up growing real big. Now, one thing I will say.
But you don't see that until we give some other character intros. Go ahead, man.
One thing I will say is that they make a lot of jokes on the internet about height of people, specifically not being like 6 foot, or when they say they're 5'9", it's like, short, 5'9", you're short,
All this short king stuff.
I am a short king. Just so you know, I'm short, and
they only do this with men. They don't talk about height with women. But I don't want to get into that too much.
I don't really get it. I'm short, and I'm living pretty comfortably. So
yeah, honestly, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter your height.
It doesn't matter if you're a small gorilla or a big gorilla.
It matters your heart, and again, a character with big heart we will meet very soon. But first, we meet somebody with a heart that's 3 sizes too small. He starts out very Grinchly, and you'll find out why. 12 years later, Max O'Hara, played by Robert Armstrong, who also played Carl Denham in 1933's King Kong, and also played him in Son of Kong, like not even 6 months later. Very rushed sequel. We go listen to our episodes about that. Get fully on board with King Kong and Son of Kong. It'll make this episode 10 times better. Trust.
As well as our talk of Willis O'Brien and
Lost World,
Harryhousen, and
Lost World,
the stop motion effects that they would employ in this movie.
We did talk about that, but also if you want the mentor of Ray
sadly, me on
Harryhausen.
production, I'm probably not going to get too much of Harryhausen, so we're gonna have to save that for.
I know a little bit about his works from the movies I've seen.
Isn't like Creature from the Deep or something in the 1953?
Was that the one about the giant octopus it was like a septopus, right? It had 7 legs instead of
I think we're gonna get to that next season, sadly, but
next season is a barn burner.
We'll have a lot of Willis O'Brien in our King Kong stuff,
Yeah, going forward. I will tell you this though, Harryhausen worked on about 80% of this movie. His mentor, his idol, Willis
even though
O'Brien,
this is Willis O'Brien's
World.
last film, technically he was not the main brunt of it. It was really
it was Harryhausen. Harryhausen just
in his first thing.
He was great. But we'll talk about the Harryhausen story is just like a story made in Hollywood. We could talk about that later. I could just see somebody making a movie about him as a young man. Anyway, back to this. So Max O'Hara, played by Robert Armstrong, again, very similar character, and also his sidekick Greg, which I keep calling him Tex because I know he's from Oklahoma, but I keep going. He's like, "How y'all doing? I'm a cowboy." I keep calling him Tex in my mind because I keep thinking he's a cowboy.
He doesn't sound like the accent you're putting on, though. Really?
Oh well, I'm not doing a great accent on that, but he's played by an actor named Ben Johnson. I've never seen anything he's done, but that's okay.
Yeah.
They're on a trip
I'm
to
gonna ask you to do a Ben Johnson impression, like at a party. Just like do a Ben Johnson impression.
Nobody asks for Ben Johnson. Okay, they're not going to ask for that. They're going to ask for Donald Trump or something funny. So they're going on a trip to Africa, looking for animals to headline his new Hollywood nightclub. Which I don't get it, right? But again, Carl Denham was going to Africa or an island, Skull Island, to get like pictures to film of crazy creatures and stuff for he's real big on publicity, which we'll find out. So Max O'Hara, he's almost a complete carbon copy of Carl Denham in my mind. He's based off of Marion C. Cooper, the actual film producer. Ruth Rose based it off of him, and she did the screenwriting. So anyway, in Africa, Max, this other guy named Crawford, and Greg, they do manage to capture a fair amount of lions, which we see later, and I've got my own issues with those scenes. Sometimes when the lions are being chucked around, I say chucked, when they're being chucked around by Mr. Joseph Young, who we'll meet in just a moment, they're using miniatures.
Mr. Joseph Young.
That's what he's. I'm sorry. He's like Mr. Young was my father. Joseph is my name. Joe is my name. Just call me Joe. Now he's actually listed in the credits. It says Mr. Joseph Young as himself, which I thought was cute. This gorilla is pounding on a lion cage, and it tumps over. I don't know if they actually tumped it over, or knocked it over with the lion in it and filmed it. Just
everything,
so they could composite
the compositing is that everything the ape can touch or appear in front of is like one thing that likely is like clay, the physical, and the real world, which is the camera.
You're right. It's either stop motion. It's either stop motion or filmed.
If he touches a man, then that man turns into clay.
Yeah, or if he swipes past him and the guy.
Yeah, he has the secrets of Midas on his side.
Right. Okay. So the cowboys rush into action, and they attempt to catch the beast alive under Max's orders. Crawford is the local hunting expert for Max O'Hara. He tries to stop him completely by exclaiming, "Are you crazy? You can't rope a gorilla."
A gorilla can rope you, though.
Yeah, that's true, and he does. He's pretty good with a rope, as we'll see. The two men have captured several lions and are about to leave the territory when Gorilla Joe Young shows himself to everybody. He is 12 feet tall, and he weighs about 2,000 pounds. The gorilla in Son of Kong was 12 feet tall, too.
Yeah, now Mighty Joe Young does have, very different eyes. It's very, the gorilla head is very... The way this gorilla is animated is so fluid.
It's very nice for the time.
Immaculately fluid. Like, especially the way he, punches the ground, which I guess was modeled after King Kong. But it's so fluid. Everything he does. Props to Harryhousen. This would probably be Harryhousen's style, which is
Well, the only thing that could
he's
stop
animating at 120 frames per second, man. He's just...
Well, if you're talking about stop motion, in this movie, the only thing that can stop Joe's motion is Jill Young. She's grown up now. Again, it's 12 years later, so I did the math. That makes her 20. The actor is 20 as well. Jill Young, played by Terry Moore, arrives, and she calms Joe down. She is mad about everybody starting this beef with Joe, and she storms off with him.
No one understands.
Later, Greg, a.k.a. Tex, I'll keep calling Tex, is hopelessly smitten, and he kind of likes Jill. I know you probably don't. I don't know if you saw it or not, or felt those vibes, but I sure did.
It's young love, puppy love. The love that you have in your head.
It feels really young, especially she's got these little pigtails, and she looks like she's not any older than 16, which is one of my issues with this. So after everybody's calmed down, Joe does listen to Max O'Hara's nightclub proposal. He's like, "We're going to make you a hit in Hollywood, and it'd be great." She kind of is liking it. She's starting to lean that way. She needs the money. Her father died 6 months before this part of the movie is taking place. Now we fast forward to opening night at the Safari Club. I mean, this thing is decked out. It looks very
Yeah, it just
African
from all
village.
the things that they do in this, they bring out all the men in the stuff. They they have lions
It's very stereotypical
in the glass.
Africa. It looks like Tarzan the ape man. Just
It's a huge
exploded
set.
in this
You
room.
gotta give them that.
I do, and they
And the kids, it's a
they
huge
destroy
set.
the
The camera
set.
motions through it. Everything that they do is top notch.
they destroy the set later, and it's nonstop action. It doesn't let up. So Joe makes his first appearance. He is lifting up a platform with Jill Young on it, in a dress, playing on a piano. It goes back and forth.
This
between
is a very famous part of this movie.
And
This
the song,
is
the
a
song they're
famous shot
playing
for
is,
the century.
she's playing "Beautiful Dreamer" on the piano, and that's
Like-
the same song. That's the same song that Joe liked as a baby when it was played on a music box.
Yeah,
Okay.
I want to say
Yeah.
that what they did, like in King Kong with the stage, like that was the origin of that and all. But then, like the way they expand it into something like new,
It's
the way they refresh it.
it's much fresher, very fresh.
It's
Yeah.
interesting.
This movie does play like a refreshing, more family friendly take on that
Yeah,
whole
because see,
thing.
they when in King Kong they zoom out to show the gorilla. In this, they zoom in with the gorilla as well, so that you get to see the person as well as the stop motion gorilla on this
It
stage.
makes it more intimate in a way. You're like, you're struck by the size of him.
Yeah,
but
because
it also
in
feels
King Kong they go
feels
they go down to the person presenting, then they zoom out to this big shot, and then they zoom back into him. In this, they while he's on the stage, they do this.
I will tell you this though, it makes it very expansive in one way. It makes it claustrophobic in another, because it's a big room, but he's a big ape, and there's going to be a time in this movie when you realize this world just wasn't made for King Kong or Joseph Young. The next part of the performance that night is a tug of war with the 10 strongest men in the world, which they then go down the line and list each one. And they give them all these names like, and next we have Enchilada Supreme. And after that we have the Incredible Bulk. And after that we have Thanos. And then after that,
Slammin'
the Mighty
Sammy
Thor.
Manacker, Bomber Henry Kolke, Max the Iron Man.
I love
Rasputin,
that. He says, I am Iron Man.
the Swedish Angel.
Oh, by the way, let's stop for a second. The Swedish Angel, did you notice his face looks kind of weird? This is actor Rondo Hatton. He had acromegaly. I guess it's some kind of weird thing with your face is just strange. He actually did a bunch of movies in the 40s and 50s. His whole claim to fame is, I look weird. And I'm...
Yeah, by the way, these are all professional wrestlers in real life, so that's one thing going for them.
The last guy, Primo Carnera, I think he's actually listed in the cast, so he must be like a real boxer. Well, guess what happens? Joe, in a funny sequence,
Primo
pulls
Carnero, he had been like the world heavyweight boxing champion for a little bit.
Yeah, and besides, he's got a great name. It sounds more like a professional wrestler name in my mind. But anyway, back to this.
Well,
So,
they're all
Andre the
professional
Giant.
wrestlers.
Yeah, well, some of them were, yeah, and strong men. So he pulls
Yeah,
each
the
one of these
strongmen
guys
all-
into the water, and dunks them all. It's a great sequence. It
That's
really is.
one thing they always do with CGI is water. Everything meshing with water, because water is not like solid matter.
But the water in this they used mostly real water, except when there's a part where Primo Carnera actually is upset. He's actually pulled up via rope. He's the last guy on the rope, right? And he starts, speaking of rope-a-dope, I'll tell you what that means later. He pulls him up.
I was about to say that on the rope does sound like something a wrestler would do.
Well,
Slingshot.
rope-a-dope in boxing is basically you act like you're not the best boxer, and you kind of let them kind of get some hits in so you can see how hard they hit, and then you go, gotcha now, and they go pop, pop, and then they take you. You let them go for a couple rounds, and then you rope-a-dope them, and third round you just put on your real strength and you just knock them straight
Yeah,
out.
basically the
That's
punch-out
RoccoW.
strategy. Let them give you a big punch and then dodge out of it at the last second and then punch them back.
Right. Well,
Rinse
just
and
like
repeat.
the Nintendo game Punch-Out, there's a giant figure that a little guy is punching at. So if Primo Carnero is going to be like Little Mac, so he's sitting there punching at him, and Joe is just like swipe punching him and knocks him into the water, picks him up, throws him in the water. It's great. It's a great sequence. So Joe is getting popular. He's there for 10 weeks. Hollywood's biggest nightclub attraction. But Joe and Jill are getting homesick for Africa.
Yeah, I feel like, 4 weeks is something where you're like, hey, okay, yeah, this was fun. Maybe a little bit exhausting, but yeah, this was fun. Twice that is like, well, okay,
This
and
is
then
almost
10
3 times that.
is
Yeah.
definitely like the line.
And she says, she says it feels like 10 years. So that's, I mean, has it been nightly? Have they been doing this nightly for that many weeks or once a week? I think it's nightly.
Even still, it's the same thing over and over again. Like, you don't believe how scary it is, like, behind the scenes, where it's like, they're saying it for the first time. You're not. So
Right.
you're thinking about all the things that you'd need to do, and if you did it correctly, they don't know anything. They've only seen the theater thing for the first time, and may not even, notice any, particular mistakes. So it's very, grueling on the mind. Especially repetitive stress. That definitely won't do it for you.
Yeah. I can't even imagine what it's like.
Take it from me. Take it from both of us. We've both been in the theater industry.
There's some professional wrestlers where it was said, one guy said, I've been on the road for 300 nights or 300 nights a year. It's like you only had 65 days off, or sometimes people would say 350 days.
Don't
so you
truckers have a business?
days off.
There's truckers that
truckers. They have by law they can only
drive
do,
as a job, and that's got to be some of the most repetitive thing ever.
It is, but
driving
they
from
do
the one end of the
4
country
days
to the
on.
other is exhausting. Imagine having to do that as a job.
Well, a lot of them promise. They make a promise in the contract. They said you will get home to see your kids and your wife on the. You get 4 days on and 3 days off, to kind of balance the whole work-life balance thing. So that's not something everybody does. There are some rules. Some people don't follow them, but some people do.
Yeah, but I wonder the first person who thought maybe I should do that as a job. What immediately encountering
you mean trucking,
is that
or
actually a good idea?
But some people, they like it. They like the open road and that freedom.
Speaking of freedom,
somebody's not free. Jill is not free, and Joe is not free. Max says you can't. You signed a contract, and the cowboy Tex guy, he goes, he's a love interest, right? So he says, that contract's no good. She's underage. And they never said what age she was. I did the math later, and it made me feel a little better. But when I was watching the movie, I was
that is one thing you can
is she
get
17?
struck for legally is being of age.
Is she 16 or 17? What is underage? She's
Child
underage.
employment is not something to be taken lightly.
Right, but he says she's underage, but you seem like a 25 to 30-year-old dude, and you're interested in her. She's not that underage.
And I mean, you did sign a contract and everything. Even still, if you're young,
do you have to be 25 to do that kind of contract, or do you have to be 18?
If you're a young music producer, who you're young, but I want to get in the industry playing, acoustic guitar, and people like you, but then you still do have some contracts in there because you signed them with some company to be able to do your stuff.
You have to be above 18. If you're not above 18, you have a parent or legal guardian that sometimes has to sign off on some of these things. This is true for a lot of like the Britney Spears when she first started out. Or,
it is a general care to be able to make some of this stuff
like
happen. Yeah. But it's still sort of it's
she doesn't really have
no joke.
She doesn't have a parental, which is probably where some of her issues come in because she has to sign.
Yeah, we don't see her father really after the beginning.
Now he passed away 6 months before the scene where it says 12 years later. He passed away very.
So yeah, you gotta. How do they own up to this?
So the interesting thing is that later Jill. Spoiler alert: Jill and Greg become a thing, an item later, and they move back to Africa together. And you're thinking, okay, well, did they get married? They get married, but she's too underage to sign a contract with Max O'Hara, right? But she's not too young to sign a marriage contract. And I think we talked about the math that I did earlier. She's 20, so I wouldn't consider that underage. I wouldn't consider that a young marriage age either.
Yeah,
Some
what I
people get
think
married at
about
20.
age in the representation in media, and I definitely do have to have some more thoughts about this. But on preliminary thought, I would say that it's the age is defined. Well, first of all, I guess first of all to say the age is a construct in terms of you're making a character and and giving a character an age, right? Or
Right.
An actor associating actor with a specific age with this character, and I do think that there is a divide between style. It's you can have some things that style them a little bit younger. Maybe you want to make them more adorable
there's some
to the
issues
eye.
there's some issues I have with that. Like in some anime, there is a character who's 200 years old, but she looks 16.
Yeah, that is to say that also a third side of this, is foreign beauty standards. Not only is there a way a character is defined, but also the character is also defined under the standards of a specific country. Foreign countries' beauty standards are very different to America's own, so it's a little bit scary. You don't know how exactly they think.
No.
A lot of cultures do have a distorted,
let's talk about
relatively
the actress.
sense
The actress
of beauty
real
standards.
quick. The actress real quick, his name is Terry Moore. And I didn't know this before we started. After I watched the movie, I looked it up. She was recently married to famous inventor Howard Hughes. She was 20 getting married. So I guess that wasn't that young, but she just looks younger than 20. I'm sorry.
To wrap my thoughts on that, I do think there is it's a very tricky divide between styling a character a specific way toward what you're styling the character, what avatar I guess you're putting that stylization on, as well as the standards of judgment on which in a specific country.
But there are unintended side effects with that.
I'd say if they're
it very quickly can get into some weird territory.
I'd say if you're styling a character, but more of the issues are with your country's I guess definition of things, that it's not necessarily the author's fault as much as the environment upon which is around.
Yeah, and not everything stays
And that
within
is
the
not to be
country.
blamed.
It's exported out.
You have to judge sort of the intention behind it in terms of is the author so much the fault at this, or rather the environment in which it is based upon? Or is there a more active base in terms of something that is, actively not really great? As I said, I haven't thought about it really long, but I will say that there is definitely sort of a divide to be made in terms of I guess, the fault, to an incorrect
and you have to be careful about
definition
that kind of thing. So,
of a character.
So 17 weeks later, or 7 weeks later after that conversation, Joe is miserable. He's tired of performing. He's homesick. They're even, she's even doing an organ grinder, the organ grinder where they had the tiny little monkey jumping around. Remember that from Caligari, Cabinet of Dr. Caligari? We saw that in a scene. Well, it's the similar thing. He's got the little cap on his head, and he's, he's up there. And they're throwing these little, I don't know what they were. They look like plates or coins. They're supposed to be plastic coins or something. And you throw them at Joe or near Joe. And if he picks one up, if it matches the number on your table or whatever, or I don't know how this worked, but it seemed like kind of a gambling raffle kind of thing. And if he picks up your deal, you get money or something like that. But some people were throwing bottles. So it got a little bit out of hand. He gets mad and roars at the crowd. Jill calms him down. While that's happening, a group of drunk guys, which these guys, these drunken louts are shown to mistreat a cigarette waitress girl. So you're already going, the director's already leading you down to hate these guys. So they go down where he's caged, and they get Joe drunk, and then complain that he drank all their alcohol, and they're torturing him kind of, and they one of the guys has a lighter, and he burns Joe's hand with it. It gets really bad. He breaks out, smashing through a wall. He's
all sorts of destruction. I think behind the
It's
scenes there was one
amazing.
part where they were, letting loose some animals, but then they got a little rowdy, and second unit director David Sharp apparently punched a lion in the face that was about to attack a cameraman.
But he wouldn't have attacked the cameraman had we had some kind of care for the animal's
this
well-being.
lion, and then it shocked him so badly that he let go of the cameraman.
Yeah, but this is not the worst movie I've seen with animal violence, and we can talk about that.
Yeah, there's
I'll
worse.
show you. There's a movie called that came out in the 70s called Roar. It took place on a preserve where this family keeps lions and tigers, and these lions and tigers are really going for. I mean, they're being really rough with people. It feels so real that it's freaky. Yeah, I'd have to show you some scenes from it. And this movie, I don't think could get made nowadays. People would be too upset at how the creatures are treated. I was like, shoot, how are the humans treated? Because they're just like scared for their life. So I thought about that movie while I was watching the scenes from this, because there's a lot of lions that don't come into contact with people quite yet, really, but you see them behind the glass, and you know that they're being like poked and prodded, to get the right acting out of them, and it's just kind of like you're like, so the nightclub gets wrecked, and
Yeah, you won't believe how much like various things goes on. Of course they let loose animals, all sorts of objects just get broken around, and he's literally like swinging around on a rope to attack people.
it's okay. I know that I'm not saying this scene is like
Ambition.
this scene is great. It's great. I'm sorry. It's just well done. If you can get aside the whole animals being, treated incorrectly, it's really, really great. The compositing, how much work this movie puts into it. I mean, it's amazing. It'd be amazing if this movie was CGI. We'd be like, wow. But
yeah,
the fact
like,
it's all done
you
by
don't
hand.
have to make it all CGI though. Like literally,
No,
that's
no,
the
you
one thing
don't.
though, is you're discounting the art of stop motion.
Yes, or practical effects too.
Wasn't there something like
So-
the Mad Gods, Swollen Gods, or something that was just ambition
Yeah.
out the cahoots? Recently?
Yeah, I've seen a lot of that one, and it's yeah, I didn't like that one. Okay, because of all the destruction that happened, a court decree orders Joe to be destroyed or killed. Jill pleads to save him, but the pleas are denied. Greg, O'Hara, and Jill devise a plan to get Joe out of California using a moving van. You see, O'Hara, just like the Grinch, his heart grew 3 sizes large that day, and he starts to kind of go, man, I messed up, and really rethinks this thing. Their plan is to use a moving van and get him to a cargo ship to send him back to Africa. And a worker tells the authorities what happened. On the way to the ship, the police spot the moving van and give chase. It's a really good chase sequence. You've got Joe, peeking out of the back of the car or the van. It's really nice. He's been transferred into a covered truck somewhere in between in the shot in between the chase. So they go after the covered truck that has Max in it, and he's like, oh, well, he's like trying to, get them off the scent. All right, so it's a decoy. The police eventually stop the van. They arrest Max. Now the truck with Greg and Joe and Jill get stuck in mud.
I will say that there is a Backyardigans episode where they get stuck in the mud in a truck, fire truck to be specific, but still. Anyway, it's been a running gag for this podcast to bring up the Backyardigans because it is a big source of nostalgia for me. I'm a Nick Jr., Disney Jr. and
Little Einsteins was a huge favorite too. More Backyardigans though. I think
That was my jam. That was my jam. So
Backyardigans had the
Backyardigans
most.
is a big source of nostalgia for me.
it had the most legs with it, is what I'm saying. Is it had the most, because Little Einstein, I remember you liked that, but this one lasted. I still like Backyardigans songs to this day. I mean, they're super.
Yeah, and it is a good series even to this day. 10 years after I enjoyed it to death.
Everybody loves that song, Castaways. I'll have to show you a meme that I found of some dudes looking like they're in like a gangster rap video, and they're lip syncing Castaways instead of.
So,
it's great.
Yeah, this next scene is the orphanage scene where an orphanage is burning
Yeah, and like
down.
I said, it's amazing. It's tinted red, like I said. It's amazing. They try to save the kids.
Yeah, they tint it red as comparison to the gray that they normally don't leave it at. Which
It
is
makes the
interesting 'cause
fire
it harkens
pop.
back
It makes
to
the
silent
fire
days.
pop. Yeah, it does. It does. It makes I was thinking it makes the fire look more orange, and that's a good thing.
Yeah, I wonder if this would have popped up on television, and television would still have been black and white.
Oh. Yeah, probably
like
not.
a lot of
because
times, like where they
no.
aired like The Wizard of Oz.
No,
on
it would've been- it
television,
would've been black
no
and
one
white.
knew on television that it turned into color because
Right.
it was black and white.
Everybody's a hero in this. Jill's a hero, does some heroic saving. She just runs in there, heedless of the danger. Greg, aka Texan Cowboy, whatever his name is, he goes in there. He saves some kids too.
Yeah, this is a
So
great
does
set
Joe.
piece.
Joe, it really is. It has to be seen to be believed. Joe saves kids. Everybody's like, "You're a hero, Joe. There's no way they're going to try to put you down now." And after that, we're at the end of the movie. So what happens is we go back to Max O'Hara's office. He's still running around going, "No, we got to have the biggest thing here. We got to have the nightclub. Da 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 da. This and that. You got mermaids. All these different stuff he's doing." And he goes. The guy comes in. He goes, "Hey Max, I got something, a little present for you." He goes, "What is it?" He puts a projector up, and they show a silent film. It's from Greg, Mr. Texan Cowboy, and Jill, who are like I guess an item now. They're at the ranch there, and so is Mr. Joseph Young, Mighty Joe Young. He's there, and he waves goodbye. He gets a banana and we get the
Interesting.
end.
He eats it like a human. He unpeels
He
it like a
does.
human.
He
Most
does-
gorillas don't.
He doesn't just go, just chuck it in.
The
Yeah,
thing is, I'm
well,
pretty sure he did eat a banana the regular gorilla way earlier in the movie, so that this is just for effect that he peels it.
you have a better memory than that for me than that. I don't remember that at all. But I will tell you
He'd eat like a couple fruits.
this movie.
I don't think there's really anything to complain about with this movie. This movie has greater story complexity than either Kong movie 15 years later. It's large scale, famous scenes.
King Kong is still effective to this day, but this movie was really
and the
good.
Mighty
This is
Joe
a really,
Young, just Harryhausen style.
it's a really
so
great
smooth.
family movie. It's a really great family movie too. Families, I think this should be a family classic. It's just get all the
especially
kids together
since you
and
have
enjoy.
Joe throughout this entire thing. Like, King Kong was only, partway through the movie, right? In this, Joe is interacting with anything and everything. Yeah, King Kong was doing wonders on
Yeah.
re-releases, which is
Yes.
where they made this film to sort of capitalize upon that.
And capitalize on the fact that people were feeling sorry for Kong. They were kind of like investing in with this humanness, this humanness that we all have.
They spent 14 months making these special effects sequences.
And I wish this movie did better than it did at the time, though.
It did not do well at the time, though.
Not as far as box office. Let's just say that. But
It
what are some
grossed
other
basically the amount of what it had cost, really.
Oh, it broke even?
Yeah, which is the one thing, though.
That's not a success. That's a
they
flop.
always say,
Sorry.
don't put all your eggs in one basket. Like, don't, save a little bit of budget, because you might, if the estimated performance doesn't hit higher than your budget, then you didn't plan correctly. But I don't think they could have planned for this.
There's a lot of movies, I would specifically say the Marvels that came out earlier this year or last year. I can't remember. The Marvels came out and they spent an ungodly amount of money on the effects. And they're okay. I'm like...
There's a Paramount Plus crab movie that they barely did any advertising for until it was out. And they were like, "Oh, it's a new original Paramount movie that they barely do these. What a shame that they only gave like one tiny trailer
movie.
And you haven't heard of it for a reason."
I haven't heard of it. You're absolutely right, and
there are many
I
different
don't hear
cases of which I would have to collect some info on to be able to relate. Because
I don't hear about everything, but I've never heard about that movie.
But yeah, it came out. I think it was like a musical. I think.
Was it based off those? Was it based off those do little crab dance?
No.
No.
No, but
it has nothing to do with anything. Just
like it's admirable
crabs.
to create, original creations in this world, but they don't market them as much as the SpongeBob movie. Speaking of planned movies, a sequel called Joe Meets Tarzan was planned, and it would have had Mighty Joe Young team up with Tarzan, played by Lex Barker, who was in one of the Tarzan movies of the time. Although, yeah, it didn't do so well, so they were like, no, we can't do that.
Yeah, because this movie didn't make any money, so they're like, let's just no sequel.
Apparently, Terry Moore said another actress was originally already hired for the role of Jill by running to the end of the RKO lot and back after Ernest B. Schoedsack asked her, and that she was then hired on the spot.
Why did she run?
I guess she could sure run, but she couldn't hide, act. I don't know.
She did okay. I couldn't tell she was crying at one point. I was like, really? Let's get some more emotion here. She's okay.
The Cowboys in Africa sequence in this film used footage originally shot to be used, but in a planned but not completed follow-up to King Kong: The Valley of Gwangi. This film would come out in 1969 as a Harryhausen film.
Yeah, I think Valley of Gwangi is actually it's somewhere on my tentative list to watch for the podcast at some point. It's worth it. It's worth it. I will tell you one thing though. Who was one of the co-producers of this movie, other than Marion C. Cooper and Schoedsack and all that? It was John Ford. And what is John Ford famous for? Rio Bravo, famous westerns, famous western movies. So why wouldn't he have cowboys in it? In fact, it's like King Kong meets cowboys in some ways, at least at the beginning of the movie. So John Ford, famous western guy's got to get his cowboys in there because that's what he's famous for. But go ahead.
I guess it's interesting that King Kong doesn't spend that much time in New York versus Mighty Joe Young spends a larger amount of time in New York.
It does. Yeah. It
so
does.
There's got to be more specialization for tone than I guess is a consideration. Now let's talk about something that happened the year previous to this movie that was it was a big change, all right?
Okay.
U.S. versus Paramount, which, by the way, was the largest studio in the 40s. Interestingly enough, Paramount. The interesting thing is they had already filed for this court case in 1943, but they failed for basically filing too soon for evidence.
Were they filing for bankruptcy, or why were they filing for?
The USA versus Paramount case. The big issue was that that all the major studios' production structures being vertically aligned, or rather the production in terms of the theater, the way that they were, booking things in the theaters, and just entirely, mass taking over these theaters, right? It was a de facto oligarchy. In fact, Google is currently sort of under wraps for kind of this stuff. Basically being too big. Dead serious. It's
a monopoly.
A monopoly.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. It's like Google is
do not
going
pass
under
go,
case
do not
tests
collect
for being too big and needing to segment.
Yes.
So
yes, I've heard of that.
It's funny
Facebook did something similar.
All of
Meta.
the wordage that they use, that's basically the issue. Is Google is too big. Google has swallowed so many ad companies and made so many deals with ad companies and grown as an ad company.
Well, we do have laws here in America. They're called antitrust laws. So they're supposed to
literally
do some.
The name of Google is what you use to say when you search for something. You say you Google something. They say they don't want that, but that
I've heard Gen Z and Gen Alpha that's leaving their lexicon.
Maybe. I guess there's not really a reason to say that you're searching for something online.
It's like, what is Gen Z using if they're not saying Google it? If they're not saying Google it, what are they saying with some other word? I don't know. What would you say?
So this was to basically force all studio-owned theaters to be sold and outlawed block booking of films, which basically they couldn't push their entire year's catalog of movies, 50 movies, onto theaters.
Right, all
Really,
at once.
as a result of this. And
yeah,
theaters now show many more smaller studio B movies and such, rather than they would have a method of bundling a B picture or a short subject with an A studio picture.
Right.
And they would even like blind buy these B movies just for this purpose. This is all for a monetary guarantee, which is like if you're gonna sell, someone else's film, it's always gonna be paired with Paramount's film. So Paramount is always making money, regardless of whatever film is being shown in that theater. Paramount will always make money, or
Wow.
Warner Brothers.
that's
That's
Warner
probably
Bros.
a better, more apt
Oh, yeah.
example. The result of this allowed increased budget as independents obtained more breathing room industry-wise, which would be Universal Columbia and United Artists weren't being squeezed by Paramount, MGM, Warner Bros., and Fox was the main thing.
And United Artists
It's
later
interesting
would
that
get
Universal Studios was a smaller studio because, as we talked about there, they didn't even have a chance of a theater chain, and they were shrinking down at this point. Like they were sort of buckling. Remember?
Yeah, Universal International. What were they called? No, Universal.
Yeah, they're Universal International.
International. Yeah. What I was mentioning though, William, is you said United Artists, but I remember later United Artists started buying their own theaters. They have United Artists theaters.
Yeah.
So they would I guess that was to kind of wrest control away from the big name chains.
Yeah, I guess so. Foreign companies would be able to distribute to art house theaters, notably Akira Kurosawa movies, Godzilla, that's a big one, La Strada, that was a big one, Bicycle Thieves, that's a decent one.
That's a good movie.
It's so many awards.
I saw Bicycle Thieves for the first time. It's a Vittorio De Sica movie, and I saw that when I did my film history and criticism class.
Yeah, it's always got to put that in the film schools.
I knew that taking that class was going to be useful. My job is not in that at all, and I'm using film history and criticism as a hobby. So that was money well spent. I could have just researched that stuff on my own.
Satyajit Ray's Apu trilogy would also be this sort of like the rise of the
Indian film. Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
We get Bollywood from all this stuff. Indian movies were not in America really until the 1950s. With this is where Satyajit Ray could, to some extent, get some success on what he did.
I think the most famous, I don't know if he was Indian or not, but the most famous actor at this time would have been Sabu. In America.
They did have some, of those actors as well in these movies as well beforehand. Like with Thief of Baghdad.
Sabu was Thief of Baghdad. Yeah, Thief of Baghdad, that's right.
Spaghetti westerns. Italian. The new French wave.
Italian directed. I've seen a lot of French wave. I've seen a lot of spaghetti westerns.
Yeah, and you don't even think of it,
yeah.
but Britain is also in this consideration as well. James Bond, Hammer Studio Productions.
Yep.
We'll be doing some of those later, not James Bond, Hammer.
There's some British movies that do cross the pond, like Day of the Triffids. That's on our list, Day of the Triffids. Yeah.
Yeah, again, we've talked about how TV would, have the amount of theater goers. This would, make more ambition from studios to be the epicest thing in the whole world.
You're saying it would TV pulled people away from the theaters.
Yeah, TV pulled people away. The theaters were really starting to die at this point in many different aspects. This being sort of the catalyst. But they were sort of making, the epicest movies in the whole world, rather epic movies.
Less people are going to theaters now than they did earlier before streaming.
We did talk a little bit about the 3D movie experience, like the smell-o-visions of the day. That would be in the 50s. Due to this, they wanted people to go to the theaters because 3D. Well, you get the smell.
Like the Tingler. Remember the Tingler?
Yeah,
where they would put
the skeleton
put those
would come
sensors
down halfway through the movie.
Yeah. Oh, that was a House on Haunted Hill, I think. Yeah, but they had in the Tingler, they had these things in the back of the seats, and in certain scenes it would go, and they'd be like, ah.
RoccoW would die in the 50s, as well, which is one thing. Sort of this failure that RoccoW was the smallest studio and suffered for a lot of this. They died in the 50s. Speaking of which, RoccoW was the distributor to Disney at the time. Peter Pan was I think one of the last RKO distributed films. That was like 51, I think.
Okay. That's very,
Disney.
very soon after this came out.
Yeah, they would replace him with Buena Vista Productions. But
yeah, that's right. I
before,
remember
entirely
Oh,
acquiescing.
yeah. Every
Buena
time
Vista.
the old Disney movies would come out and say Buena Vista Productions. Yeah.
Yeah.
You're bringing back memories to me
But
now.
Disney would start making live action in the 50s, like Treasure Island, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, Davy Crockett, Mary Poppins, all that stuff. They pushed into this industry at this time as well.
Yeah, they weren't doing animated full-length animated movies as much. They would sink their they would dip their toe into
I think they were in like the Robin Hood, Fox and the Hound sort of status at this point.
Sleeping Beauty more I would say.
The star system would disappear due to actors being more vocal about industry struggles as well as being more ornery and picky about what they want to do and not want to do.
Right. They
Like,
had
don't
some,
make me do that
some-
scene. It's too
they had some-
horrifying.
They had some gumption, or they were just like contractually obligated. That's the word I'm
And
looking
then
for.
people outside of the circles were hearing about this and going like, do we really want to get onto this actor? The stars really struggle,
Yeah.
So the star system would disappear due to this vocality. Hays Code. The Hays Code would weaken as well due to foreign works not under it being allowed into America, as well as independent studios not big enough to really contact them. It's interesting to think of. We talked about, movies where like Universal was constantly in tabs with the Hays Code about like during the production, writing the scripts and stuff. Is like, is this okay to include the movie? We'll chop it as we go.
Yeah, and
Approve it as
and
we go.
It's a horror movie, but we can't show any
And many independent
horrors.
studios. Yeah, many independent studios couldn't really like do that, because they're like, how are we going to contact this big Hays Code administration?
And they often, and many times, here's the other thing: bigger studios could afford to reshoot scenes and to get another
couldn't.
script writer.
And it's especially important, like,
independent
throughout the
movies. They're
production,
like,
'cause,
we have
like,
no
maybe-
money to film this over again.
Yeah.
just to please you.
Another thing to think about is, like, even still, especially considering, like, throughout the process, like, maybe sure they could contact them once, but then they get shut out from making the movie. Instead of being able to, like, the Hays Code to keep them around because they're an important studio in their eyes. To go, like, let's keep giving these guys chances to, throughout the process, create the film, but if they don't, like it, then they're more cold to them.
Or they just cut the whole production.
Yeah, just
and you're
cut
like,
the whole
we
production.
we worked so hard on this. We're trying to be, groundbreaking or avant-garde, and we just can't do that. Yeah, and a lot of foreign movies, they were more open about, especially French movies or British movies. They're like,
yeah, they didn't heard of Hays Code. What's
no,
the Hays Code?
No, there was some stuff in Britain that had their own rating system, and sometimes it was a little more hardcore than America. And it led to later in the late 60s, early 70s, and mid 70s of something called the video nasty. They were called video nasties. They're video nasties, you see. There'd be movies that you have a hard time getting a hold of. You almost had to like get them on the black market. They were.
Yeah, and that probably did
scary gore
constitute of a
movies
lot
were,
of American imports as well.
Yes, those were flagged as nasties. Many of them. Yeah.
It's like House of the Dead. Why do you have that? Nasty,
Yes.
I say.
Rawhead Rex.
You tell me he's a
And,
ninja?
yeah.
So, that's all I have.
Oh, one thing to mention: this movie had a lot of was very influential on later works, and also
Began Harryhousen's career.
Harryhausen's career, but Harryhausen got an Academy Award for this movie in special effects.
Yeah. Real good job on all the people who made it. It's so sad that it didn't do financially well, because it's like they definitely
he made up for it. He made up for it later. A lot more different movies coming forward. Let me see if I can name some. Of course, Jason and the Argonauts, 20 Million Miles to Earth. We're doing that one. His last movie is Clash of the Titans. I saw Clash. It came out in '81. That was Harryhousen's last movie. But I saw Clash of the Titans on TV on TBS, Superstation TBS. So I was obsessed with that movie. I was like, "Ooh, I got to get the book with all the pictures in it, and of all the Kraken, the Pegasus, and Medusa. It was awesome, and it was awesome stuff. Or Calibos, was one of the bad guys, or Zeus and Perseus.
Yeah, ancient times and mythologies are endlessly fascinating. It just the way, the archaic way was presented. The things of Homer, the Bible to an extent, you could say. A third
examples here
is Arthurian legend.
Yes.
Next episode will be a Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's court, which means
nice. That's a nice transition.
Time for me to read a book by Mark Twain.
I read the book. I think you can actually listen to the book on YouTube if you want. If you want to listen to the audio.
Yeah, but I still have to consume it so that we can have a lot of comparison and love from Mark Twain.
And if you read the book, we can talk about the book as well, you and I, because I've read it. So we could bond on that.
Yeah, it's a good book. I'm sure.
Yeah, it's good. It's got a lot of it's got a lot of Mark Twain in there. He has his own little things he wants to say about society, truth, politics, governments. He has all those things to say, and he weaves it into the story. I think that for the film versions, I think they watered them down a lot to make them, I think, more palatable to the average audience. But we'll talk about that next episode. But man, this movie, it
was mighty and young.
It made me feel young again, as when the Earth was new. No, I feel invigorated, man. After watching this movie, it's just the action scenes were just like, I was like, I'm back.
I don't
I'm
think,
feeling
other
it.
than the acting, there is much to criticize because of the large scope and scale that they had for it, as well as the very light tone and what
the animal
scope they were
peril.
achieving.
I would say the way they were
going
treating, they were chucking lions around like we didn't care if they died. You were just like, whatever. I thought it was great. It's a great family movie. Really good effects for the time. It's a must watch from me. If you want to, get a thumbs up, I say it's a must watch.
Yeah, and if you haven't watched Dumbo yet, watch Dumbo. If you've watched Dumbo, watch this movie.
Yeah, look for the comparisons.
Because
they're there.
Common themes.
Oh, they're there. They're there. If you want to see them, they're there. But don't be a Dumbo. See us next time.
Thanks for listening to Cinematic Fantastic Podcast. Click here and here for some more excellent content. Hope you'll enjoy it. See you soon.